So welcome, everyone. My name is Roger Berkowitz. I'm the founder and academic director here at the Hannah Arendt Center at Bard College, and it's a real pleasure to be with you today for what is really a celebration of the relaunch of the Hannah Arendt papers at the Library of Congress. This is a really important event for those who are interested in Hannah Arendt, and I'm thrilled to host this workshop and discussion today. We have some great speakers who are going to tell you a little bit about the history of the Arendt papers at the Library of Congress, and then help navigate you through how to use the papers in your research, as well as how they use it in their research. So I'm going to start right away. The first speaker and the person who's really responsible for this relaunch and for us being here today is Barbara Baer. She is a master's and PhD, and she's a historian at the Library of Congress, where she collaborates in digital humanities projects and is the curator of the Hannah Arendt papers and collections in literature, culture, and the arts in the manuscripts division. Just one reminder, please mute your mics while you're not speaking, and welcome, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Roger, and I'm getting my slides set up.
Great.
The Hannah Arendt Papers collection at the Library of Congress Manuscript Division constitutes a large and diverse group of over 25,000 physical items and more than 82,000 digital images spanning Arendt's personal and professional life. The papers began in bulk in the mid-1940s because of Arendt's forced departure from Nazi Germany in 1933 and her escape from occupied France in 1941. They begin in earnest with her as émigré and citizen in the United States, and as a resident New Yorker who over time traveled and taught as a visiting professor at several universities. The collection includes personal family materials, as well as general correspondence, articles, lectures, speeches, book manuscripts, and writings, organizational records, notes, printed matter, and legal documentation. Together, the archive provides us with documentary evidence of Arendt's mind and heart, her networks of fellow intellectuals, editors, writers, and theorists, and her concerns as a friend, colleague, philosopher, and teacher. The Library of Congress received the papers as a gift and bequest from Arendt and her estate in various installments beginning in 1965 through the year 2000. The collection was digitized between 1998 and 2000 through the generous support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. For many years, some content was limited to on-site access only at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., the New School in Manhattan, and the Hannah Arendt Center at the University of Oldenburg, Germany. In collaboration with these partner institutions and with the Hannah Arendt Blucher Literary Trust, the Library of Congress is now able, through this newly updated digital presentation, to make the entire digitized collection available for public access online. I want to give you a quick orientation on how to access the new site, its framework, and an idea of some of the content it holds. In closing, I will highlight a sample folder of material as an example of the variety of primary materials you can find as a researcher, student, teacher, lifelong learner, or enthusiast of Arendt. To find the new version of the Digital Humanities site, you can start at the Library of Congress homepage at www.loc.gov. Go to the Digital Collections menu, search on her name there, and from there to the About This Collection portal page for the collection. This is the main page of the framework. You can also get direct to this page from an outside search engine like Google, using her name and the About This Collection phrase as your search. The articles and essays part of the framework features 3 topical essays by literary trustee Jerome Kahn. These offer a brief, in-depth dive into the themes of the material and Arendt's life, and also are a good place to start if you are teaching. There are also active links provided, which you see on the left side of the screen, to expert and teaching resources at the Library of Congress and also other institutions, including BARD. The related resources page gives readers and researchers information on archival collections at the library, links to study center information, including Oldenburg and BARD, and offers a brief bibliography of books, edited writings, biographies, films, and scholarly studies, aimed primarily for students and teachers, as well as researchers. How do you search the site? You can use the Collection Items tab to search on keywords throughout the collection. Here in this example, searching on the New Yorker. The featured content carousel provides a sampling of documents from the collection, including letters and writings by Arendt and others. This is a good way to start to explore the site or to introduce students to it. You can click on the thumbnails to leap to the fuller documents. For example, there are materials about Arendt teaching her 1965 political experience of the 20th century course at Cornell. The collection is arranged at the folder, not the item level, matching the archival organization of the collection. You can page through the images in a folder one by one, like this, or see all the contents of a folder in gallery or grid mode, and click on a particular thumbnail to enlarge the image. One of the best ways to search the site is to mimic the experience of a physical researcher in the reading room by using the electronic finding aid for the collection, which is available online and through a link from the website. There are electronic links to all the various series of the collection, which you can go into the series and then search. And each folder has a digital content available link, which works virtually as if you were taking the folder from the box and opening it up electronically to see all the contents that are inside. For example, clicking on the Walter Benjamin folder in the correspondence series brings you to this destination. Or you can see in the speeches and writings series, edits of between past and future. You can zoom in on a document for a closer view. Here, seeing her race through a litany of political philosophers while thinking through the themes of absurdity, of belief, and of ignorance. Or read drafts of the Origins of Totalitarianism. Here, the introduction for the revised 1966 edition. The Adolf Eichmann file, stemming from the 1961 trial, is a key part of the collection, including affidavits of witnesses, clippings, minutes of sessions, the indictment, and international reaction. Her drafts of Eichmann in Jerusalem can be found in the writing series. There are letters of support for her Eichmann essays from Robert Lowell, who calls them, quote, an almost miraculous job of accumulation, narration, and sifting of truth. And from Mary McCarthy, who calls the series absolutely glorious and says their effect is oxygenating. Arendt writes to McCarthy in 1963 about the opposition both women faced for their work during the time McCarthy published The Group, which became a bestseller. The dated W.H. Auden correspondence file with materials from 1960 to 1975 is an example of using a folder as storytelling. And this is one way to teach from the digital presentation or formulate an assignment for students. Students could, for example, collectively read, research, and report to one another on different content in the file, look into the major figures that are mentioned, find related materials elsewhere in the website, compare to her published work, or transcribe and annotate particular documents in the folder. The quick story here for the folder begins with Arendt's wonderful February 14th, 1960 letter to Auden on the nature of forgiving and the philosophical question of whether forgiving is unconditional, its relation to Christian charity, and how it differs from judicial pardon. Auden writes to her from his teaching post at Christ Church, Oxford. And he includes on the back of a July 5th, 1973 letter, one of his last poems, the whimsical "Thank You, Fog." Upon Auden's sudden death later that same year, Arendt saved clippings of obituaries and critical essays by Stephen Spender and others on the importance of Auden's work. She saved copies of the programs for the memorial service held at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in Manhattan, wherein poets Robert Penn Warren, Galway Cannell, Muriel Rukeyser, and others read selected Auden poetry, and the offertory anthem was from Benjamin Britten. The cathedral thanked Arendt for loaning letters and a photo for display for the service. And she lent her help as well to Auden literary executor, Edward Mendelsohn, who contacted Auden's friends to help date drafts of poems Auden had sent to them. She dates her copy of Thank You, Fog for Mendelsohn. She expresses her gladness that he is working with Auden's English translation of Brecht. And she lets him know that there are no handwritten notations in the books that Auden gave to her. There's a line in Thank You, Fog, where Auden writes of reminiscence and reading, of affinities and fun, and also of facts of filth and violence. These elements too can be found throughout Hannah Arendt's papers, which are rich in evidence of her, the thinker, and also her, the lover and the friend.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I know I speak for almost everyone on this Zoom call to say we're incredibly grateful for your work and in your debt for really the heroic and Herculean task of relaunching these papers and clearing all the rights and getting everything available online. So thank you very much. The next present, we'll do questions at 1 o'clock after all the presenters are through. So you're welcome to raise hands, but we'll come back to the questions at the end. The next two presenters will be Thomas Wild and Barbara Hahn. Can people mute themselves, or I will mute? I will mute people, and then Thomas and Barbara, you'll have to unmute yourselves. Thomas Wild is an associate professor of German studies and research director of the Hannah Arendt Center here at Bard College, and my colleague. He is the co-editor-in-chief of the critical edition of Hannah Arendt's complete works in print and digital, which began to come out about 2 years ago. And Barbara Hahn is the Max Cade Foundation Chair in German Studies Emerita at Vanderbilt University and honorary professor at the Free University, Berlin. She is co-editor-in-chief of the critical edition of Hannah Arendt's complete works, print and digital. Welcome, Thomas and Barbara.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you very much. I hope everybody can see the shared screen. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce the work that we have done with the library with Hannah Arendt's papers for our critical edition that we started several years ago. We will introduce this edition, which is a special edition, not only because it first presents the entirety of Arendt's works, but also it's a bilingual edition. And you can see here the general editors who come from various disciplines: philosophy, political theory, literary studies, history, and media studies. We have a number of collaborators. Of course, you can do such a huge task not on your own. The Free University in Berlin is the host of our edition and also the headquarter, as it were. The Center for Digital Systems that is located there as well is our essential partner for all IT-related issues. I just want to mention, of course, the Library of Congress, the German Literary Archive in Marbach, as well as Bard College as the 3 locations of Hannah Arendt's papers. And Waldstein Verlag is the publisher of the printed editions. I also want to take the opportunity to really thank from the bottom of our hearts the Hannah Arendt Bücher Literary Trust, and in particular Jerem Cohn, whose unwavering support was essential for our work and has been practically and also morally. And it's also a wonderful occasion to share these thank you note on this call, since the trustees of the Hannah Arendt Trust, Jerem Cohn and Mary McCarthy and Lotte Köhler, were essential in setting up the archive initially by working, I think, several years, if I'm not wrong, in Hannah Arendt's apartment in collaboration with the Library of Congress to organize the paper and make them available. So all of our work wouldn't have been able without their work. So thank you very much for this on this occasion. Here are our funding collaborators, and these are our responses to the question, why do we need a digital edition after all? I think we need a digital edition for these 3 pioneering tasks in order to provide a reliable scholarly textual basis, in order to provide an edition for the future, and also in order to raise awareness of a very, very special feature of Hannah Arendt's works, and that is that she is a multilingual thinker and writer. And these will also be the 3 items we will address in our brief presentation, with which I will hand it over to my co-editor-in-chief colleague, Barbara Hahn, who is also the editor and co-editor of the first 3 books that have come out. Please, Barbara, I hand it over to you. You might be muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Tomas, you have to unmute your screen, unshare your screen.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would be too complicated. So I will speak briefly about the scholarly edition. Next. So what we are doing is we are publishing all of Hannah Arendt's texts, the printed as well as the unprinted text. We had to exclude the letters, which is too bad, but that might be a task for the next generation. And we are presenting all the texts that Hannah Arendt wrote in the language which they are written. So we are dealing with about 25,000 pages, which we are going to publish. Next. So it's an extensive variety of genres, languages, and disciplines where these texts belong, and we are trying to present that in a even way. Next one. The first challenge, of course, was how to structure an edition like that. And what we did, we organized it in 17 thematically structured units. Next. So here you can see the books that Hannah Arendt published during her lifetime. She published 10 books, marked in yellow. She left behind 4 unpublished projects and her Denktagebuch, her thinking diary.
No, sorry.
There's one missing, Thomas. We have to go back.
I'll go back.
Okay.
2 missing.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Here we are.
So, and then we will put together the two units collected by the editors, her writings to Jewish question and essays, reviews, poems, interviews, etc. Next. We already have published 3 books. I will show you that a little later. And we are working on all the projects marked in green. So as you can see, there are the 2 big projects are among those, namely the Origins of Totalitarianism and the Eichmann in Jerusalem. And we decided to start with these huge projects first, so that we are sure that we can publish them on time. Next. We structured the edition from the very beginning as a hybrid edition, because we thought that's the future of scholarly editions. Next. That means we are printing all the texts that we are presenting. We are publishing books, but at the same time, we are presenting a web portal. And Thomas will later show you what this web portal allows you to do. What we're trying to do is we are not privileging one media over the others. We are trying to enhance the potential of both of them, the digital one and the books. Next. And in order to do so, from the very beginning, we worked with TEI transcriptions. TEI means transcriptions. Now, I forgot what TEI means.
Encoding initiative. Yeah.
Transcription edition initiative. That means, as you can see here with on the right side, this is a highly coded transcription. So the text on the left-hand side in our transcription looks like that, unreadable. But what you can do with that, with this database, we produce the books on the left side. We produce transcriptions on the upper level. You can see that this is a diplomatic transcription, and we produce a constituted text. So one database allows us for very different ways of presentation. These are the books that we already published. They all look alike, as you can see. The first one came out in 2018, the next one in 2019, and the third one this year in January. Very briefly to the core editorial work. Of course, what we first have to do, we have to constitute the texts, and we differentiate between versions and variants. All the variants will be available online, and all the versions are available in print. We are presenting a critical apparatus, annotations, commentary, etc. And the main principle that's leading us is information and not interpretation. So we want to present for our readers books that they can interpret, and we present the material. Of course, we describe the genealogies of the texts. We present editor notes and afterwards. Each and every volume, of course, has a bibliography, and we also will put together at the very end of the project a cumulative bibliography. Then we present indices, and I will show you one of these later. So these are the books. If you open them, table of content. This is the text that you saw at the very beginning. So in the printed version, it looks like that, Zionism Reconsidered. Here you see the annotations. They are at the back of the book. What we do as a service to our readers, we present Hannah Arendt's material the way she left it. So what you can see here, we not only give the quote, we also show what she did with the quote. So this is from her excerpts and notes, and she underlined her notes. And so we show the reader what was important in this quote. This is from the first project, an unfinished book by Hannah Arendt. And we, of course, had the problems. How do we present fragments that she left behind? And what you can see here is we decided to show cutouts in her typescript as a kind of a, so that you can see she first started to write the text like that, then she cut it out and started all over again. So this is a possible representation in a book for editing, her editing work. Here you see her deletions are, you can read them, but you see that it was a deletion in the text. And then here on the right-hand side, you see a missing transition with those question marks. There we put together fragments, but there's text missing that we could not constitute. What we did with all the texts in the printed volumes, and of course also in the web portal, we wrote introductions to each and every text. And there you find all this information that you need to understand. How was it that the text came about? What was the reception of the text, etc. We also show where we found all the typescript that we put together. And then, of course, we annotate each and every quote that we found. And what you can see here, we checked with all the quotes whether the book is available in Hannah Arendt's library, and if it's available, and she worked with the quotes, we show the reader how exactly she read the quote. So these are Hannah Arendt's underlinings, and sometimes there are remarks in the margins, and we also present the remarks in the margins. So you can see her reading the book while she was writing her text. And then, of course, in each and every book, we describe the editorial principles for the edition. And we provide the reader with a nachwort and afterword.
Well, now that we've heard about the way in which the books look, I will talk briefly about the way in which the web presentation, what the web presentation of those texts looks like. So here you have the web portal. It's live already. It's still a beta version, but it's a beta version. There will be a better version soon. And you see the address, it's hannah-arendt-edition.net, and people can go there and, for example, look for this text that Barbara just showed from the book edition by going in those writers. Here, click on TypeScript, for example, then Zionism Reconsidered. And the default view you will see is the facsimile that the Library of Congress generously made available, and a diplomatic transcription on the right-hand side. You can also open up different versions to display the transcription of this original facsimile TypeScript. Here is again sort of the code that you can, the code is public, so you can see how this was encoded. And then if you click on the respective possibility, you can have, for example, the TypeScript on the left and the constituted text on the right. And not only the constituted text, but you can also on the right-hand side see those blue items that show you, here is a textual commentary, and this might be either, in this case, someone that tells you something about the Biltmore program and the way, passages in Hannah Arendt's work where she talks about this, or it will get you to, for example, the annotations we saw earlier from her library, and we will see in a moment in a much more extensive way in the presentation about Cornelissen and Thomas Bartscherer. You also have the possibility, for example, to have the constituted text on the left-hand side and the diplomatic transcription on the right-hand side. Diplomatic doesn't mean that we make compromises in order to reach an agreement, but diplomatic means the diploma is being represented. So the page as it is in the TypeScript, but in a readable form, so that, for example, handwriting is now typed and researchers can read it. So in other ways, these are all the versions you can technically compare with one another. And this is also the idea behind the hybrid edition, some novelty, that we create a research environment for reading Arendt's text and analyzing Arendt's texts in a non-linear way, but one can compare them. And there will also be in the future digital tools that enable particular text mining and research opportunities. So here, just as a summary of the different ways that the texts are being presented or through the encoded text. I also want to say and mention that Ingo Kieslich, who's also on this call, is the person who really was absolutely essential in developing all of this. And if you ever come to Berlin and visit our location at the Free University, you will meet Ingo, and he will be able to explain you all the details of the digital edition. Please seek us out when you're there. To conclude, I would like to talk just for a moment about the third pioneering task, and this is presenting Hannah Arendt's texts in the languages, plural, that she wrote in. And you can see this is a bilingual edition, not because we translate any text, but because Hannah Arendt made it a practice of her thinking and writing to write in a plurality of languages. These 4 books that are being marked in red are actually 8 books, and they will be presented in the printed version in a synoptic way, so that you have one language on the left side, the other language on the right side. Among them, for example, the human condition, or as the German title reads, Vita Activa oder vom tätigen Leben. Here's a mock-up what this might look like in the web portal presentation. The color coding that you can see is what we envision that this is a possibility for people to click on that. Black means these are exact equivalents. Blue means this is only in one language, but not in the other. And green means these are substantial rewritings. So you can see that about 20% are maybe something like actual correspondences. 20% exist only in one and not in the other language. About 60% are what we call substantial rewritings that are relevant for the textual analysis. And here just the opening of the human condition, where she talks about to think what we are doing, and you can just see maybe through this, through looking at it, that what in English is thought and thoughtlessness, and to think in German has very different terms. So it's very relevant. It's Besinnung that comes up here. And so it's really relevant to consider this for the analysis of her writing. And this is what we would like to initiate and facilitate, so new readings for the future. And just as a summary of what we are trying to do here is really to provide the groundwork for future research. And if I may offer just a final thought or idea, especially about the plurality of languages, there is this famous question in her Denktagebuch where she asked, is there a way of thinking that is not tyrannical? And one thought one could consider is her decision to write in a plurality of languages one way of responding to this essential question after the experience of totalitarianism? Thank you. I will unshare now.
Thank you, Tomas and Barbara. I'd like to now introduce Thomas Barcher and Wout Cornelissen. Thomas Barcher is the Peter Sorian Senior Lecturer in the Humanities at Bard College and a Senior Fellow at the Hannah Arendt Center. He is co-editor of the forthcoming critical edition of The Life of the Mind, which he will be talking about with his colleague, Wout Cornelissen, who is currently at the Freie Universität in Berlin. He is the co-editor with Thomas Barcher of the new critical edition of The Life of the Mind, and is published on Arendt's conceptions of thinking in Artifacts of Thinking and the Bloomsbury Companion to Hannah Arendt. Thomas and Wout.
Thank you very much, Roger, for that kind introduction and for the invitation as well, and for putting this panel together with Barbara Baer at this happy occasion. I will first say something about our archival research, which we conducted in the Library of Congress, both in the physical library and online. And directly after me, Thomas Barcher will say something about what our volume will eventually look like. I would also like to acknowledge our co-editor, Anne Oysterschulte, with whom we're closely collaborating on our volume. First, about the life of the mind. Most of you know that this is Arendt's last book project on the mental activities of thinking, willing, and judging. And Arendt conceived of this project in the late 60s and worked on it from 69 until 75. It is unfinished, and by the time of her death in December 1975, she had complete typescripts of the first two parts, thinking and willing. Now, from 1970 until 1975, she presented these materials in various versions and formats at various occasions, including lecture courses and invited lectures. And the best known probably is the Gifford lectures at the University of Aberdeen. There's only one text she published that belongs to the complex of the life of the mind, and that is Thinking and Moral Considerations, which was later partially reintegrated actually into the typescript of the life of the mind. Now, even the brief overview that I just gave to you is already based on research, on archival research, as well as on interviews we conducted with different people, first and foremost with Jerome Cohn, and we are extremely grateful for his support throughout the years and the many conversations we've had with him about the life of the mind. So when we started on this project, in order to be able to decide which texts from the whole corpus of text of the life of the mind to include in our critical edition, our very first task was to gain a complete overview of all preserved materials in the Library of Congress that are relevant to this book project. And since it's an unfinished work, we're both lucky and not so lucky, because almost all materials are actually preserved. So there is a lot, many different typescripts, manuscripts. Now, at the time when we started, the facsimiles of the Life of the Mind were only available off-site. So we were not yet able to access them from any computer anywhere over the world. So we had to go to either the New School or Oldenburg, but in our case, it was usually the New School, and take a look at these facsimiles one by one. And of course, the launch of the new web portal is a tremendous resource for Arendt scholars, because there's less labor involved in being able to look at those pages. So we're very excited about it, and look forward to working with the new platform. So congratulations to you, Barbara Baer, for having made this possible. In our case, we also had to conduct an so-called autopsy of the actual paper document. So I went to Washington, D.C. in 2017 to look at these documents folder by folder, file by file. And I also want to thank you again, Barbara Baer, and your team, your colleagues, for having allowed us to go there. It was very exciting, obviously, to see the actual documents. And for our kind of work in constituting the text and telling the story of the history and the genesis, the genealogy, if you will, of the Life of the Mind, it was necessary to also see the actual paper documents. So thank you very much for your support and help throughout the years. Now, in our edition, we are not just including constituted texts of Arendt's typescripts and manuscripts, but also, as was already said by Thomas Wild and Barbara Hahn. We are also annotating Arendt's quotes in the direct and indirect quotes. And there are many of those in her typescripts, if only because Life to Mind was her last work. So a whole life of writing and thinking and reading goes into it. So we are annotating about 5,000 different quotes, just to give you an idea. And today I want to give you just one sample, just to give you an idea of how the Library of Congress has been useful to us in not just for the constitution of the text, but also for tracking down, tracing all the different sources Arendt used. So I'm now going to share my screen. I have only one slide and give you a sample of one quote in The Life of the Mind. Let's see. Right. Okay, so the quote I'm going to talk about is Nietzsche's intoxication. I mean, we're not getting intoxicated today because it's an online event. Maybe if we would meet in person, we might be able to raise a glass afterward. We can't do that now. But I thought this was a fitting quote. And this quote appears in, let me see, it should work, but now it doesn't. Yes, it does. This quote appears in the Life to Mind Thinking in the last version of the typescript in chapter 2, section 10. And this is what it looks like in the typescript. So the sentence runs as, so Arendt is writing about the thinking ego, and she writes, this ego, the thinking ego, may not know whether man and the world are real or, as especially in Indian philosophy, are a mere mirage. It knows only of being alive in an elation which always borders on intoxication, as Nietzsche once remarked. Now, this is the word it's in quotation marks, this is the word I'm talking about. The same word appears in a so-called transition, which Arendt wrote for the purpose of her lecture course on thinking, so for oral presentation. So the next week, she repeats this phrase, it summarizes what she said the week before. And one of the things she highlights is Nietzsche's notion of intoxication. So his characterization of the experience of the thinking ego as a form of intoxication. So this is the quote. So it's slightly differently phrased, but the word appears. Now, it was tremendously difficult for Thomas and me to find the source of this quote. One thing we did is look at the German translation of the German translation of the Life to Mind, and there the translators used the word Trunkenheit, but they do not provide a source for that, and so we were actually thinking that Rausch might be it's likelier that it's the word Rausch in Nietzsche. So we suggested different things, Birth of Tragedy, but wasn't close enough. Morgenröte, closer, but no markings in Arendt's library. So eventually we found this. In the Arendt library at Bard, Arendt's copy of Heidegger's book on Nietzsche, the first volume, is preserved. And there we found the following quote, and it's underlined. Das abstrakte Denken ist für viele ein Mühsal, für mich an guten Tagen ein Fest und ein Rausch. Now, at least we thought, okay, so now there's an underlining. So we are certain that she read it. And it wouldn't be the first time that she finds something or takes something from one of Heidegger's books, even if it's not his own quote, but he quotes someone else. And she highlights it. But of course, this is not sufficient proof for us. It's close, but we don't know for sure whether intoxication is the translation of the German word Rausch. So back to the Library of Congress, because the Library of Congress, as you know, did not only preserve the typescript of Arendt, but also excerpts and notes. And so I found the following note card. So I highlighted the word Rausch, and here we have a note card that's preserved in one of the thinking folders. It's the exact same code. Das abstrakte Denken ist für viele ein Mühsal, für mich am guten Tagen ein Fest und ein Rausch. And what do we see? Arendt translates this herself, and she uses the word intoxication. So now we are sufficiently certain to decide, for us to decide that we will include this as our annotation to this passage that Arendt herself never ever references in any version of her typescript. But here we have the final, I think we can say the final clue. So this is just one sample. The other 4,999 quotes you'll find in our published edition. And I will now hand it over to my colleague Thomas, and he will tell you more about what our edition will include and look like. And he will also say more about the annotations. Thank you.
Thank you, Wout. I'd also like to thank Sam Hill for initiating this event, Roger for hosting it, and Barbara Baer for overseeing the great work we're celebrating today. It's great to see so many new faces and also so many colleagues and friends. I'd like to mention two in particular. Helene Tiger, I saw before, I think she's still here, who's the archivist of the Bard College archivist, who has done incredible work helping us with Arendt's library. And Jerome Cohn, who's been mentioned several times. I'll just say he's taught so many of us by example what it means to think with Arendt. So it's great to see all of you here. My brief remit today is to tell you a bit more about the life of the mind. And this is on behalf of Wout, and as he mentioned, our third musketeer, and Oosterschulter, who can't be with us, but is with us in spirit. I specifically would like to talk about three things. First, the contents of the two printed volumes. So that is what you will hold in your hands when they are published. Second, I want to say something more about how the annotations will look. And I hope thereby to illustrate what I regard as one of the great benefits of this new edition. And that is to have a more complete sense of how closely Arendt read and worked with the books that she references. You've already begun to see this, and how far-ranging and complex the conversation is between Arendt and her sources. I think that the annotations that we'll be presenting makes that legible in a way that is difficult to see when just reading the text. And then third, I'll close with just a word about how I understand the complementary relationship between our edition and the Arendt papers at the Library of Congress. So first, to the contents, the new edition will include the constituted texts of the typescripts Arendt completed, so that's the thinking and willing sections. And that's based on the last typescript that Arendt worked on and incorporates all of the revisions she made. Second, we include the only part, as Wout mentioned, the only part of the material that Arendt published during her lifetime, that's the essay Thinking and Moral Considerations, which is published in Social Research. And we also include, in addition to those, earlier versions of the main text and related material that Arendt prepared for oral presentation at various venues, and material she prepared for courses that she taught at the University of Chicago and the New School. And that material includes, for example, reading lists, seminar notes, handwritten seminar notes, and also typed, and final exams. The two volumes will also contain, for each of these texts, and this Barbara mentioned before, a description of the material conditions of the original documents. So that is the documents that are held at the Library of Congress on which our constituted texts are based, and a brief account of the genesis of each of those texts. So that is to say, how the text came into being. There will also be an afterword by the three editors in which we tell the story of this entire project, the life of the mind in all its many bearings. Finally, as Barbara mentioned before, and I'll be covering a bit of ground that she already did, but I'll be doing it with an American accent. Finally, all of Arendt's texts that we publish will be fully annotated. Our annotations aim to be consistent, complete, and concise. Now, you may sense a bit of tension, perhaps, between completeness and concision, but in practice, as you'll see when you have the book, it means simply adhering to the guidelines that we set out. And to give you a brief sense of what that is, for every reference Arendt makes to another text, whether it be Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Shakespeare, Heidegger, whatever the reference, we aim to document the original source or sources to which Arendt refers in the original language, and any translations that she consulted. Whenever the relevant texts are in Arendt's personal library, which is, as I mentioned, housed at Bard College, and when the relevant passages are underlined or commented on in the margins by Arendt, we reproduce the text with underlining and marginalia. We also provide bibliographical information that enables readers to find the passages in the authoritative modern editions in whatever language, and if it is not originally in English, we also provide the bibliographical information to find it in an authoritative English translation. There are a few other kinds of annotations. For example, when Arendt refers to an earlier or later passage in the life of the mind, we provide the page number, some others, but the large bulk of those 5,000 that Wout mentioned are annotations of the kind I just described. Now, to show you how the annotations will look, I'm going to bring up a couple of slides. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, you just got to share the slideshow. Yeah, play the slideshow.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're looking at here is a page from the constituted text, and I'll be speaking briefly about this passage, the thinking activity according to Plato, the soundless dialogue that we carry on with ourselves. So we determined that this passage is, that Arendt's reference here is to the Theaetetus and the Sophists. These are the passages in Plato where this idea comes up. And in her library at Bard College, the Theaetetus, there are 2 editions of the Theaetetus that are marked, and there are 4 editions of the Sophist that are marked. So our edition will reproduce all of those texts. What you see here on the left is the constituted text that the running text that you'll read, and then a page of the annotations. The annotations are a separate section at the end of the book. You'll see that it's keyed by page number and line number. So according to Plato, ellipsis, ourselves. Below that is our reproduction of all of the texts in Arendt's library that have the markings at the relevant passage. So for example, in this case, these are 3 of the Theaetetus references. One is in Greek, one in English, one in German. Those pages on the facsimiles on the right are facsimiles of Arendt's books in the Bard Library, and the left is how it will appear in our edition. And just to make this very clear, what you see here is the Cornford translation of the Sophists. The top is how it appears in Arendt's own volume. The bottom is how it appears in our edition. And as you can see in the pink or the sort of mauve there, it's reproducing the text with the underlining. and below that, the marginalia is represented. And I should say this, what I'm showing you is from an earlier edition, so there'll be some cosmetic changes. That @ sign, for example, will disappear. But this gives you the general sense of the way we will be presenting it. And I want to say, I'll stop sharing now, just one more remark regarding how I understand the complementarity between our edition and the Library of Congress. Our edition, in principle, is aimed at presenting the material without giving an interpretation of it. We are trying to facilitate interpretation. Needless to say, every decision we make has some interpretive quality, but as much as possible, we're trying to minimize that and facilitate the interpretation of Arendt by her readers. The critical edition, we realize that many readers will be satisfied to have just a clear text with our extensive commentary, and will find no need to consult the facsimiles. But we also assume, and indeed we hope, that some readers will be prompted by our edition to want to see the facsimiles of the original documents, and so will be prompted from reading our edition to go to the library's archive. We also hope that some of you, as you navigate the complex, often bewildering welter of material that is now available worldwide, some of you will be inspired to see how Wout, Anna, and I have made sense of it all, and will go to your local bookstore or your local library to get a hold of the forthcoming book and spend some time with the new edition of The Life of the Mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas and Wout. I'm going to quickly introduce our final panelist and speaker, Samantha Rose Hill, who I've had the pleasure of working with for the last 5 years. And she is the Assistant Director of the Hannah Arendt Center for Politics and Humanities and visiting Assistant Professor of Political Studies at Bard College. She's the author of 2 forthcoming books, Hannah Arendt from Reaktion Press in 2021, and Hannah Arendt's poems from Live Right in 2022. Welcome, Samantha.
Thanks, Roger. And it's been 6 years.
Sorry. Well, yes.
I'm happy it only felt like 5. First, let me say thank you to a few people, just to echo my colleagues. I see Jerome Cohn is here, and none of this would be possible without you and your incredible generosity. You have been so incredibly generous to me and my own pursuits, but to everyone here. And you have given us the gift of Arendt's papers and archives. And I also see Ulrich von Bülow here, who oversees Arendt's papers at the German Literature Archive in Marbach, and the incredible work he does, and Barbara Baer at the Library of Congress for organizing this and working with the estate to make this happen. And I just also want to say congratulations to my colleagues for this incredible work of publishing Arendt's critical edition. The amount of work that they've done is amazing. And my own pursuits are far less ambitious, I should say. So I'm just going to talk briefly about some of what I've been doing for the past 6 years and almost for the past 20 years in working with Hannah Arendt's papers and what the archive has meant to my own research. And I'm not going to talk for very long because unfortunately I have to leave you. But I first discovered Arendt's archive in 2010. I was working on my dissertation on loss, and I went to the Library of Congress and I spent a year systematically working through Hannah Arendt's papers. I had started reading Hannah Arendt's work in the early 2000s, which in a certain way was a gift because it was the height of Arendt scholarship in the United States, it felt like. And there was a lot of secondary material being produced. And I was warned off studying Hannah Arendt by every professor that I interacted with, that I would become part of some Hannah Arendt cult. And I would only ever end up writing about Hannah Arendt for the rest of my life. But it encouraged me to, of course, somebody telling me not to do something encouraged me to pursue it even more. So when I first went to the archive, I was stunned. The archive completely dissembled the image of Hannah Arendt and her work that I had in my imagination from all of the primary and secondary sources I had encountered in my studies. And first and foremost, dealing with the material artifacts of the archive humanized Arendt to me as a woman who was incredibly passionate about life, who had spent hours and hours engaged in correspondence, making lists, planning parties, draft after draft of these works that we've come to know through their publication history that my colleagues are now putting together so that everybody can experience. She became a real figure to me, not just of thinking, but of action. And when I got to the end of the finding aid and the final folder, I discovered before they were published in German, French, or Spanish, Hannah Arendt's poems, 23 poems that she had written and carried with her from Germany through France to the United States in exile. And I was so moved by her poems, by the more complicated portrait of her life, reading these poems as a secondary biographical text to the experiences that she had in the 20th century as a German Jewish woman. Many of the poems are about her early love affair with Martin Heidegger, for her friends that she lost during the war, about revisiting Germany after the war. And I went back to Massachusetts and I started combing through the Danktage book, which had been published, for other poems and other letters and correspondence, and compiling them to see what story they open to telling. And the archive to me has always been an invitation to storytelling. I think storytelling is one of the great concepts that Hannah Arendt has bequeathed us as a political thinker of the 20th century. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what stories come out of the opening of Hannah Arendt's archive, which I've had the incredible privilege of spending a lot of physical time in. And I'm excited that now everybody will be able to do that. So for the past couple of years, I've also had the chance to revisit the archive. And I'm just gonna tell you a couple of things that I was able to include in the biography of Hannah Arendt that I wrote. I'm skipping over my notes here. And maybe to even perhaps, if there is anybody out here looking for book projects or working on a dissertation, Hannah Arendt's correspondence in the Library of Congress archive is immense. Her friendships are so central to her life and her thinking and her writing. And so many of those friendships have remained out of the light, I'll say, of at least American scholarship. There have been some beautiful volumes published in Germany that have not yet been translated to English. Her friendships with Hilde Frankel, for example, her friendships with Hans Jonas and V. Mendelssohn. These are central figures to Arendt's life and her thinking, and you can discover those friendships in the archive. I was able to piece together a timeline of Hannah Arendt's exile and escape and include a chapter on that in the biography, together with other secondary sources, which I hope will also give people a sense of what Arendt endured and escaped from, emigrating from Germany to Paris to the United States. I was also able to read some rather intimate letters between her and Hans Morgenthau from a rather late in life love affair, which are beautiful. And I just want to encourage, I'm so sorry I don't have so much time. I just want to encourage everyone to go play in Hannah Arendt's archive. I have approached it systematically, and I've also approached it with just time and a sense of wonder. And I hope that everyone just takes some time to go and play and click through those folders, and to engage in the critical edition, and hopefully go visit the Library of Congress in person someday, because there are still a lot of stories about Hannah Arendt to tell. And I hope that we're at the beginning of a new cusp of Hannah Arendt scholarship and secondary work that so many of you here today are engaged in. This is really a new beginning in the Arendtian spirit, it feels like. So thank you. And I'm sorry I had to skip over my notes.
Thank you, Samantha. And thanks to all the panelists. I mean, really, this all comes down, the work that these panelists are doing really does owe itself first to the work of Hannah Arendt's friends and trustees, including Jerry Cohn, who's been thanked by almost everyone, and deservedly so, and Barbara Baer for putting this together in the new launch. So I want to once again reach out and thank them. We have about 20 minutes left for questions. You can ask questions either by raising your hand, going down to the reaction button at the bottom of your screen and clicking on raise hand, or putting something in the chat, which I will try and monitor. So are there questions? I see the first one from Stuart Warner. You have to unmute yourself and ask your question.
First, to thank the Library of Congress. I spent a few days ago, several days, going through these archives and the ease in which one can download a PDF, the correspondence about the Robinson Macquarie translation of Sein und Zeit, they're changing mind on that, the correspondence with Correa, all of this is absolutely mind-boggling. It's extraordinary what's there. My questions, though, to concern the life of the mind. One, when is it coming out? And secondly, when Thomas Bartram was talking about what's in it, he didn't mention the syllabus that Arendt prepared for the Gifford lectures. And I was wondering if that's going to be in it as well. Thank you.
Thomas Bartram, you want to respond?
Sure, I'll take the second part, and Val, I'll give you the first part. Yes, the syllabus will be, I didn't mention everything that will be in it, but yes, the syllabus is going to be included as well.
And when is it going to be published?
I'm allowing Val to answer that question.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Well, we plan to submit it to the publisher this fall. And so we hope that it will be published in the spring. That is certainly, we're working very hard to make that happen.
So again, you can ask questions by raising your hand or typing in the chat. I have a question for Barbara Hahn. Are you still here? There's a question in the chat. Yes, she is. The question is simply, how can people purchase the editions of those volumes of the critical edition that are already published?
Well, either by contacting the publishing house directly, Wallstein Verlag in Göttingen, or over Amazon. So Amazon.com is selling the book in the United States. And I heard of a whole bunch of people who just ordered it over Amazon. And what I would like to mention, the books are not expensive.
Yes.
I can't give you the amount in dollars, but they are not expensive. So they're, even for students, should be possible to buy them.
No, that's really important, and thanks for reminding us of that, Barbara. There's a question from Yang Zhao. You have to unmute, Yang. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, you can buy them from Amazon.com. I bought one. I have one more question about the life of the mind. It's a very simple question. How reliable or how bad is the Mary McCarthy edition?
Yang, nice to see you again. I'll say one thing about this, and Val, maybe you want to say something as well. I think, as McCarthy explains in her postface, she worked very intimately with Arendt on that edition and on other works of Arendt's as well. So she was uniquely well placed to imagine how what Arendt left behind was a work in progress, a typescript that was not completed and that had, Arendt's corrections in the margins. So McCarthy was uniquely well placed to imagine how Arendt would have completed the edition, what the sort of changes she would have made to make it a final published volume, which the typescript is not. McCarthy also says that because Arendt is not there, in some cases she's guessing. she's the best person to guess, but in some cases she's guessing. What we're presenting, because we can't imagine what Arendt would have done with the final version, is simply what's on the typescript. So there's in a way there's a unique accomplishment of the McCarthy edition that can't be repeated. And then our edition will do something else, which represents what's on the page. Does that, Wout, do you want to add anything? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Wout, do you want to add something?
No, I agree with what Thomas said. It's not a question of better or worse. There's simply two different projects.
Great.
Maybe I can just add that the edition will contain a page correspondence between the critical edition and the McCarthy edition, because we understand that the McCarthy edition is the edition with which everybody works. And so we want to make sure that people can use both editions and can go back and forth and use both editions according to their needs and likings.
I see there's,
And just thank you for mentioning that, Thomas. So yes, there will be a so-called concordance in the back of the book listing the page numbers, the corresponding page numbers of the McCarthy edition.
I see there's a question from Ulrich von Bülow. Would you like to ask a question, Ulrich? Nice to see you.
Yes, hello. I'm Ulrich von Bülow from the German Literary Archive. And thank you for all the concentrated papers. But especially interesting for us was a paper of Barbara Baer. And congratulations for this wonderful website and presentation. It's a shining example for us in Marbach, because as you know, we have a smaller part of the papers and also some books from Hannah Arendt. And it would be very sensible to reunite this distributed things on a website. And so I have seen with interest that there is on the left-hand side on your website links to Helen Tiger in Bard College, and maybe sometimes also to Marbach Literary Archive, because we are planning to digitize all these materials here. Some of these we have done already for the edition, and we have relaunched our OPAC, and now we are developing on these things. Thank you. It's not a question, it's only a statement.
This is great to hear. Great news, Ulrich. Barbara, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say thank you so much for commenting, and please stay in close touch with me. Let me know about your progress, and we can definitely update the links to other available material when it does become available. And to all of you, to let me know if you have updates to the related resources, because we want to be able to connect around scholars who are working in all languages and all over the world.
Wonderful. Thank you. There's a question from Rob.
Thanks. This is great. I found it very exciting about tracking, I guess, Hannah Arendt's thinking through kind of keywords, like the idea of Nietzsche's intoxication and finding it from multiple sources and kind of connecting that all together. It seems to me that one of the prerequisites to do this better might be, again, to digitize kind of this, and then providing some sort of search. And I was curious whether the new documents available in the Library of Congress, I see they're in PDF form, whether they would be available in full text and some kind of full text search, or whether there's any kind of movement towards that.
Barbara, is there
I'm searching for the unmute button. Right now, we do not have that capability because we don't have transcripts that are connected to the work, which is, as everyone on the call knows, a massive, massive aspect. But you can also use the critical edition and other sources in order to do those kinds of searches. And then go from there and look at the facsimile version on our website. So that's what I would recommend. And maybe some of the others would like to offer other examples or suggestions of how to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that became clear to me during Thomas Wild's presentation as well, that in a sense, using the Hannah-Arendt-edition.net site in conjunction with the Library of Congress papers site could be an extremely valuable way to search and do research. So I think that's an important point. I see there's a question from Ringo Rosana. Yes, hi Ringo.
Hey, how are you? Nice wishes from Germany. I have maybe it's a question which is too big. I like to know if you discovered kind of a new angles or angles on Hannah Arendt, which will extend our view on Arendt. So, are there any things which were or which have been in a way surprisingly to yourself? Is there anything new in it that we should change our reading or understanding of Arendt in a way? Are there any points?
Well, I'm going to guess that many of the people here are going to say yes, but let me, is there anyone who wants to go first? Thomas Wild, I see you hand up.
Well, just I think that what the Life of the Mind presented, the team presented, maybe gives a first impression of it, and maybe they want to or could elaborate on that. But I mean, it's you said, should we read Arendt differently? The critical edition doesn't want to make this decision or suggestion. We want to provide the material for you to decide, do I need to read Arendt differently? And we do this by presenting not only the published texts with the annotations that the Life of the Mind team showed in such fascinating fashion, but also the unpublished papers. And so already this will provide new materials to see how a text evolves, for example. And also, as I pointed out at the end, the fact that I think, become aware that Arendt made it a practice to write literally on a daily basis in more than one language while she's thinking about plurality. I think we still have to start even just to accept, to think, what does that mean? We haven't really started that because she's so perfectly monolingually present in English and in German. And that this is a writing that in both languages only looks monolingual on the surface, but is in its thinking actually multilingual. This has not yet arrived in the world of interpretation of her text. So this would be just another suggestion.
I see a question from Jerry Cohn, to whom we are all deeply indebted. Hi, Jerry. How are you? Hey, Jerry, you're muted. Are you muted? You have to unmute.
Is that better?
That's better. Yes. Hi, Jerry.
Okay. I just want to say how absolutely delighted I have been with this program. And I want to thank everybody and greet everybody, and two Barbaras, two Thomases, Ulrich, of course, and Sam, and everybody else. And what I really want to say is that I had a sense here that I rarely have of what some of you have spoken about, and that is a central core of friendship that was so important to Arendt. Thank you so much, all of you, Roger.
Well, Jerry, I mean, I think we all feel deeply, deeply indebted to you for your friendship and guidance. I mean, every one of us who spoke here has been guided by you at times.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And
I want to thank you, though, today. I want really.
Well, good. Do you want to say anything, Jerry, about the beginnings of how it went to the Library of Congress, or not?
Well, this could go on for a while, making it very, very short as possible. After Hannah Arendt died, her executor of her estate, not the literary estate, but the other part of it, was Lotte Kohler. And Lotte and I spent 2 years, more or less, most of the time, I would think, in Hannah's apartment, which was I had been there many, many times with her. I'd never been there without her. And it was strange, but Lotte Kohler did a wonderful job of making one feel it welcome. And at home, she served these marvelous German lunches. She'd go over to Germantown and buy all kinds of marvelous things and make us lunch every day. And the papers were in very good shape. Hannah was very organized, actually. And the papers were in good shape. It was just a question of putting them together. They're taking folders, and they were in file folders, and to pair them to ship to the Library of Congress. And that took about two years or so. And it was of course, an eye-opening experience for me to come across these, particularly of interest to me, were these small notes that are now in the Library of Congress, these 2x4 cards and things like that, which are, and they were in German, English, Greek. I mean, on one card you'd have Latin, or even once in a while, although I don't think she really knew the language, she had studied it a bit, Hebrew even once in a great while, and. It was a very formative experience in my life, getting those ready. When they were shipped to the Library of Congress, I would virtually went back and forth from New York to Washington like a yo-yo, because I was there for the actual photographing of the, it was in a good-sized room, and on the top of it was something that looked more to me like a helicopter than anything else. It was a camera that came down on each page, and more often than not, more than once. It would go back up and come down. And that took, as someone mentioned, I think Barbara Bayer, I guess it was probably, who mentioned that it was all paid for by the Mellon Foundation. That also was a very interesting experience, working with the Mellon Foundation. They were, and I should mention that my friend Richard Bernstein was, who's also an Arendt scholar, was instrumental in that, because the head of Dick had taught it at Haverford before he came to the New School, and Bryn Mawr, which is kind of, as you know, is kind of sister school to the president of Bryn Mawr was a friend of Dick's collegially in Pennsylvania, and then she became the president of the Mellon Foundation. And it was so through Dick that we got to her back. I'm going to think of her name right now, but anyway, it was, we wanted to have microfiche, and it was she, Pat, and in any case, it was she who said, no, that's old hat. We're going to do this, and that was going to cost a few $100,000. She said, we're going to do this the proper way, and with the camera and the digitization, in other words, and that cost $5 million. And the Library of Congress told me they got a check from the Mellon Foundation. It was the biggest one they ever got. That's all. It was a wonderful experience.
That's great.
And so this I see as a continuation of that. I think this has been an absolutely terrific program for everybody.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. There's a question about the recording. The recording of this will be up on the Hannah Arendt Center website and our YouTube channel. I don't know if there'll be a link to it, Barbara, on the Library of Congress, but it will certainly be on the Arendt Center website. Thomas Barcher says that he would like to respond to Ringo's question from a few minutes ago. So Thomas, you'll probably get the last words. This will probably be the last.
Unless if there's another question, please go ahead. If not, I just say thank you for the question, Ringo. And my first answer is that I should and probably will write a book to respond to your too large question. But I can, in a way, what Jerry just said about friendship reminds me or brings to mind where I think those revelations will come. As Thomas Field said, it's not the remit of the project, and certainly not our edition of The Life of the Mind, to present a new reading. But it's very apparent to me that that in a way, the Life of the Mind has hardly been received yet. It's such a rich book. And a lot of it is, as Jerry referred to, friendship, and also reminded me recently that Arendt somewhere refers to Augustine as her oldest friend. And what you'll see in our edition is the remarkable complexity of her conversations with her old friends. And when, for example, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, she has multiple editions, English, German, and Greek, all marked up. Different things are marked up. So you get a sense of the way her emphasis shifts, what she's interested in every edition, and then what she's interested in for a particular time. And the marginalia being keyed to the texts that she's referring to has been just consistently illuminating. As Wout and I and Anna have been working on it, we have to stop ourselves from pursuing all of these opportunities because they're incredibly rich. So yes, I think there are profound new insights that we're beginning to see, and I'm really excited to see what you and everyone else who's going to be working with it will discover.
Well, I think we're out. Is there one last question? We're at about 2 minutes left. Oh, Wout, you wanted to say something? You're muted, Wout. Yeah.
Oh, in response to the question about things we discovered, it's a little early and you'll see it in the book. But one thing I think I can share is that some of the authors she is in conversation with, because that is really what it is, are more visible than others. So part of the work we've been doing is we discovered that some authors that she doesn't, maybe not always explicitly quote or refer to, are very much present in her thinking. And one thinker, which I was slightly surprised about, is Hegel, who is not as prominent in the typescripts itself, but he was very, very important to her. That's just one example, because we know this about Plato and Aristotle and Kant, but it's less well known about Hegel.
Thank you very much, Wout. Barbara, I see you just posted a nice thing in the chat, thanking the many other people at the Library of Congress who've been involved in this project. Would you like to read that and acknowledge it? Maybe that would be a good way to end.
I would, thank you. So I'll just read it verbatim. I'm just the public face for a large team of people who were the heart and soul of the work that produced the new version of the website. Thank you to all of you who thank me personally, but I was just a tiny bit of what has happened here. The library's Office of General Counsel, the library's Office of the Chief Information Office, IT Design and Development Director, and most especially Manuscript Division Chief Janice E. Ruth, Digital Conversion Specialists Tim Stutz and Chris Kapitas, Digital Projects Coordinator Krista Maher, Information Technology Specialist Mike Ferrando, Systems Analyst Barak Stussman, and Finding Aid and Webmaster Mary Lacey, all of whom are part of the Library of Congress staff. It's been a collaboration, and we are so appreciative of our partners in New York and Oldenburg, to Jerry Cohn, and to Roger and Sam at Bard College, and all the Bards Associates who have made this program possible. Thank you so much. And collaboration is a wonderful thing in Arendt research. I think that she would love the friendships that have been formed and are represented in this call and in all the work that everyone here is doing.
Well, wonderful. I want to thank you all again for this incredible celebration. Barbara Baer, Thomas Wiel, Barbara Hahn, Thomas Barcher, Wout Cornelissen, Samantha Hill, and Jerry Cohen, and everyone else who's here. I hope you really do have the opportunity to spend some time getting lost in this archive, which is now really available to you from every beach and mountain all over the world. So enjoy, and thank you all very much.